arguably the Bible was the very first book, the very first comic book, if you wish, to be taken way too seriously. So it was a top 10 pranks that went out of control type of situation. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video, I wish to talk about religion and the origin of gods and how polytheism was substituted with or for, God only knows, no pun intended, by, again, whatever, monotheism, right? The centralized religion. Okay, so actually I would claim right away that treatment of gods in the ancient world is very easy to understand by analogy. So let's assume you walk into a room of some guy or girl, whatever, probably guy more likely like today, or maybe more likely like maybe 20 years ago, like a very young guy, let's say. What can you see there? Well, chances are you will see like figurines or maybe posters of like Batman or Superman or Hulk or something like that, right? It could be Spider-Man, what else is there? Like, whatever, you name the thing, right? A superhero. So, I would claim that the superhero culture that we have today, and we've had for many decades actually, until this point, is almost completely analogous to the subculture or culture of ancient gods. And this analogy is actually like almost so direct that you can like perceive ancient gods as superheroes of the ancient times. Pretty much that's it. All right. So we have today subcultures around certain things, around certain works of art, like film or books, like some fictional universes, like again, Fellowship of the Ring kind of thing, you know, the Lord of Rings, the Star Wars, obviously, the other superhero, like just superheroes, you know, the Marvel, the DC, whatnot, right? And yeah, it's kind of like the subcultures of believers in different gods and like different, let's say, assemblies of gods in the previous times, all right? So, and literally they have even the various attributes like may the force be with you, you know, it's like the ceremonial part of, you know, like a greeting or a farewell or just a wishful, like, I don't know how you call it, like, good wish, right, towards you or something. And I remember even the literal case where a Jedi was treated as a religion in our world, right, where there was so-called Jedi census phenomenon. You might look it up. It's when various people indicate in the sense during the census Jedi is their religion, right? And just like today, we don't really treat superheroes very seriously. By the way, watch my video End of the End. I'm gonna link it in the description where I talk about how superhero cults, or like rather, why is the like finished narratives are no longer there in our modern culture? Why we need constant reboots and remakes, and why do we have franchises today? Again, which is very fitting for the superhero reality, so to speak. And just like this, people weren't treating gods in the ancient times very seriously, just like we don't treat superheroes very seriously, all right? So if we're talking about ancient Greece or Rome, for example, then the priests were actually elected oftentimes, all right? And often for a very brief period of time, like a year, for example, or a couple of years maybe. So it's, in our reality, it's gonna be like, okay, this year I'm gonna be a Santa Claus, or something like that. Which is, by the way, the Santa Claus is literally an element of some ancient cult, still celebrated today as if, like, it's fine, I mean, yeah, why not? It's Santa Claus, I mean, it's Christmas time, right? Even though it's Christmas, it's Santa Claus who is, like, supposedly a pagan, right, thing. And like nobody cares, right? Even though Christians say you shouldn't have any idols, you know, any other like figures of worship except for the God, like nobody cares. Santa Claus there is, screw you Christians. So, or you might say, well, I'm going to Comic-Con today to cosplay as an Iron Man. So that would be an analogy for a Greek guy being elected to be a priest of Jupiter, or not Jupiter, Zeus in this case, right? Or something like that. So yeah, and by the way, again, we have cases like Zeus or Thor in the Marvel, is it Marvel? I don't know, universe, which is sort of like a backwards superheroization of an ancient god, right? So we have a Zeus, like an actual god, being transformed into Thor. Well, I mean, Zeus, Thor, you know, you get the idea. The superhero Thor, who is treated basically in the same way as literal Zeus was treated back then, as a superhero, basically, right? And you have all these stories about Zeus, how he fell in love with some dude named Ganymede, etc., or whatever. He abducted some girl and had fun with her, etc., And you have the same stories about Thor in the comic book universe, right? Oh, he defeated this guy, he did this thing, he played whatever, basketball, what was that? I didn't watch the movie, actually. Anyway, so yeah, it's completely analogous to the point of complete identity, actually, I would claim. So yeah, and you might ask, well, at least some portion of my audience specifically might ask, well, what about the association of deities with like celestial objects, right? Planets specifically. Couldn't planets be like actual gods of previous ages, like Velikovsky suggested, for example? Could have been closer to Earth, etc., Well, I would say it's a pretty damn tough subject. Well, first of all, we have some issues with dating of our texts. Secondly, like Velikovsky's interpretation is an interpretation, if we are being honest. And I would make such a claim that most gods actually don't even have a planetary analog. I mean, it's understandable since there's only so many planets, right? How many do people know? Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, and that's it, right? 5 planets is as much as they could see with a bare or naked eye, right? So, most of the gods didn't have any celestial analog. Maybe it was like some star or whatever. Like many heroes in Greek mythology were supposedly placed into the heavens and served as stars from there on. But again, it's sort of like a superhero myth, right? Something like that. So, and returning to Velikovsky, for example, the proverbial Venus is associated in different cultures, not even necessarily with this planet. Like the goddess of love is not necessarily this planet. And this planet that we call Venus is, again, associated in different cultures with very different things, such as metal in like Far East, water in some like Persian area. What else was there? Like, well, love in Greece, for example, and Rome. Or light, right? Also Greeks associated planet Venus with just light bringer, you know, Lucifer. It's obviously a Latin word, but anyway, you get the idea, right? It's metal, water, light, or love. Like, are these the same things? Do they signify the same object in the sky? Not necessarily. Some of them do, some of them don't. Varies by the culture, etc., So there should be, I think, in any healthy mind, a decent level of skepticism towards this idea that ancient gods were planets, you know. This statement is doubtful, let's say. Okay, and well, you might ask me another question. Well, Eugene, what the hell? Like, if you're saying that the ancient priests were basically like, you know, cosplay guys, or at best maybe comic book sellers, if they were retelling the myth, for example. Like, why were they so smart? I mean, we all kind of know that the priests were actually the smartest people, more often than not. Well, I would say it's that because of this practice of cosplay and selling comic books, so to speak, they've kind of had a tackle on the art of conceptualization, if you wish. And it's basically the same as what science does today in quite a literal sense. Conceptualization, I mean. It just was done on another level back then. What do I mean by that? Well, some might say, well, this guy, some shaman, for example, might say, well, this guy is possessed by evil spirits. by Erinis or whatever, the spirits of hatred and vengeance or whatever. And modern, like, doctor or a scientist might say, oh, this guy just doesn't have enough sodium in their blood, right? Or something like that. So these are both concepts, right? The spirits of vengeance and sodium. Like, we don't see them, we don't perceive them, they are conceptual, right? Of course, you might say, well, sodium is scientifically proven to exist, blah, blah, blah. But then again, look at the amount of procedures you need to enact, basically like a rituals, right? Enact in order to prove that sodium exists, right? Something exists that you call sodium, which, if you undergo all of these procedures, would reveal itself in some way, right? In some very tertiary way. Same with spirits of vengeance, right? Like if you enact a ritual, maybe you can summon them or something like that. Whatever. So it's all Santa Claus, it's all Batman versus Superman, essentially. But these are concepts, right? Yeah. So that's why shamans or priests or whatever were smart. Because they've been dealing with conceptualization constantly. They were trying to translate reality into another language, right? It's not just a stupid guy, it's the guy possessed by spirits, right? Something like that. And yeah, watch my video, Mythology as Cultural Basis. Again, I'm gonna give a link in the description where I talk about this briefly, like how our reality is actually constructed from these essentially myths. Like in Zeus and Electron have the same mythological level, essentially, right? And what else? There was some other video I wanted to mention, but never mind. So, okay. So how does the transition to the monotheistic stage happen, and why and when? Let's examine these questions. Well, it happens when you start treating your comic books way too seriously. So when you take your comics books seriously, problems begin, alright? And arguably the Bible was the very first book, the very first comic book, if you wish, to be taken way too seriously. So it was top 10 pranks that went out of control type of situation, alright? So, you know, only Superman is allowed, or only Batman comics are allowed from now on. No other deities, right? No other icons of worship are allowed except for this Spider-Man, right? Our Spider-Man is better than all the other gods. So let's all worship Spider-Man. Let's burn every other comic book. Let's punish everyone else who worships Batman, because screw this guy, right? So the Muslims say, for example, your Christian Superman is just one of the forms of our Muslim Batman, right? So, and all the religious wars arise on this basis. And speaking about religious history, right? Well, it's a very controversial topic by the very nature of it. Again, if you are for Batman, then you would deny all the history that acknowledges Spider-Man, for example, as the leading deity and vice versa. So it seems like, and it's again a very controversial statement, I do agree, but this is my idea, not my idea actually, it's my opinion, which I've taken from someplace else, if you know what I mean. But anyway, I think I agree with these other people who proposed this, that centralized religion actually appears roughly in 16th century. And, well, there are some hints about this here and there. Actually, I'll give you two, not the explanations, two reasons for that. But before I do that, let me give you literally just one factoid. Do you know when the Vatican Library was established? It's 1475 AD, right? Supposedly. And even that could be a stretch. Like, this is the official version of history, the Jesuit version of history, actually. So imagine, they've had like 1 million popes, supposedly, before that, right? With a very centralized, super strict religion. But religion based on book, mind you, the Bible, right? Which literally means the book. And they didn't even have a library. Really, you know, it's like worshipping a computer program while not having a computer to run it on, right? Something like that. So that's an interesting fact, right? So I think that Catholicism actually arose as the dominant sect among other competing sects around that time. most of them were vaguely worshipping the same Superman or Batman, i.e. Jesus Christ, right? But the people who were actually calling themselves like true Batman worshippers were Jesuits, right? Because what is Jesuits? It's Societas Jesu, right? Literally, Society of Jesus, i.e. proper Christians. And when did they appear? In the 16th century, right? So yeah. So that's when roughly Christianity appears, as it is, right? That's when probably roughly, Islam appears as well. Something to that effect. Maybe a little bit later, maybe a little bit earlier. I don't really know. So yeah. So why exactly that time? So I'll promise to give you two reasons at least. So one reason is that Renaissance has made it possible to focus on moralistic aspects, right? Renaissance has shifted the focus of philosophy towards a human being, towards a person, from nature, if you wish, right? Hence, if we have our focus on a person, then moral questions would become the most important questions, all right? And that's what we observe in the monotheistic religions, right? Because they're completely centered around morality. It's the relationship between a person and the Batman, the Batman, not like many superheroes, right? Just the Batman. It's like, are you live in Batman ways? Do you live? Whatever. Do you live according to Batman's ways? Or do you not? Well, then you are a heretic, right? Or you're gonna burn in hell. In Arkham Asylum or something like that, right? So, the morality has become the main thing. And what does it mean? It also means that unification of morality was necessary, right? The Batman ways needs to be spread. And it means that in order to achieve this, you have to have a quick way of transferring the information, which is the book printing. So in order to have a centralized religion, you need book printing. Not only the book printing itself, like the comic books need to be spread very fast, very quickly, the proper comic books, only about Batman, no Superman allowed. You also need interpreters of these books because, well, the books are kind of ambiguous in themselves. Maybe somebody would like to worship Joker instead of Batman. So people should say, well, we need interpreters, we need priests, right? Specialized priests. So not only we need a way of printing comic books, we need a way of printing priests, if you wish. So we need universities, right? And that's when the first universities appear. Of course, supposedly they appeared much, much earlier, but then again, Jesuits wrote this version of history that we currently use, so God only knows, really. What we do know is that Oxford was operational in 1637 as a school for Anglican priests. That's pretty much it. Oxford was served as a priest printing press for Anglican church, right? The Batman with an asterisk kind of church. Sorbonne, the French, the Parisian university has appeared in 1600, the year 1600. Of course, again, they will say, well, it was reformed in this year. It has existed for like 500 years before that. Well, whatever, guys. So, what was Sorbonne doing? You're right, printing Catholic priests, alright? The Jesuit priests. Etc., etc. At the same time, the Russian religious reforms appeared, etc., etc. Hence, from now on, you have the printing of comic books, printing of priests who correctly interpret it. We have the Renaissance that has already prepared the soil to unify the morality, right? To shift the focus towards a human being, and therefore all these priests could have a market, so to speak, to work with. And hence from now on, you can say, like, Spider-Man morality is only allowed, right? Or not allowed, rather, and only Batman is good morality, right? Only Bible is the correct book. And the way it should be interpreted is as follows, like, listen to your local priest, please. So this has been the centralized religion, right? The centralization of religion. And it has prepared the ideologically and culturally the appearance of centralized states, like half a century after that, or maybe like a whole century after that. Arguably, again, France has become the first centralized state, roughly at this time, 1650s, right? Something like that. Yeah, again, you needed to homogenize the cultural codes of the population so they could be like later unified by a central government, something to that effect, right? So Jesuits were the ones who wrote our version of history, so they've added a few hundred years here and there, like who cares at this point, right? Yeah. And okay, so in this video I've examined the complete identity of superheroes and ancient gods, and I have shown how centralization of religion happened, why it happened, and when it happened. If you disagree, welcome to the comments. We could have probably talked also about the history of Judaism and Hebrew language, but that's a bit of a thinner soil in the modern political climate. By modern, I mean last like 70 years plus. Okay. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.